Hi there, you are listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. My name is Matt Wakeling and this is the show that I produce in Sydney, Australia, where I speak to leading guitarists and guitar figures from all around the world. Thank you so much for joining me for episode number 156. By American author Susan Masino, the author of The Story of ACDC, Let There Be Rock. Now, Susan is not just another ACDC biographer. She actually draws on years of connection and friendship with the band, dating back to the late 70s when an unknown band by the name of ACDC landed in her hometown, and as a fledgling journalist, she was sent to cover the show. Susan's book not only covers the career of ACDC, it also gives us an insight into the world of rock journalism in the crazy days of the late 70s and beyond. I had a great conversation with Susan and I know you're going to love it. Now, in my formative years as a guitar player, I spent a lot of time raiding my older brother's record collection and learning ACDC songs. So I totally loved hearing all of these stories. This episode is brought to you by The Pedal Movie, a feature-length film all about effects pedals created by the music gear marketplace Reverb. I am super excited about this film. The Pedal Movie features nearly 100 interviews with people like Steve Vai, Peter Frampton, Jay Mascis, Billy Corgan, and more, including some of our Guitar Speak podcast alumni like Dweezil Zappa, Sarah Lipstate, Johnny Barmer, and Brian Wampler. Reverb's The Pedal Movie is available now on iTunes, Google Play, and Vudu. For more information, visit www.thepedalmovie.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Fretboard Biology, the comprehensive online guitar course put together by Joe Elliott. Now, Joe is not only a fantastic guitar player, he draws on his years of experience as the ex-head of guitar at the Guitar Institute of Technology and also at the McNally Smith Music College. Here's a few words from Joe about the course.
If you're tired of wading through hundreds of random guitar videos and just want to become a better player, Fretboard Biology is your answer. Fretboard Biology is a self-paced, college-level program that'll give you the right instruction, in the right amounts, and in the right order. You'll learn the same information I taught to thousands of other guitar players over 30 years of teaching in top music colleges. If you want to make real progress with your guitar playing, then sign up for a free 7-day trial at fretboardbiology.com.
Susan Masino, welcome to the Guitar Speak podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, great to have you. Now, our introduction was connection through Joe Matera, the Australian great rock musician and journalist, who let me know about your book, ACDC, Let There Be Rock, the story of ACDC. So we're going to talk about that, but it sounds like you've had a pretty amazing career as a rock journalist, which we might touch on some other aspects of that work as well.
Yeah, it's been a fun ride, and I'd like to thank Joe for doing that. Joe is a great writer himself and a great musician, as you know.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy to be here, and my anniversary this summer of starting to write rock and roll will be 44 years.
Wow.
This summer. It doesn't seem possible, but it's true.
That's amazing. So when did you start writing, and what was the initial spark to start writing about rock?
Actually, I grew up in the music business. My parents were venue owners, so they always had live music. And they had several different places, so I grew up watching musicians, load in and load out and perform, and we'd get to know the bands and the families, and I was just a huge music fan. And as I got older, I wasn't a great musician. I'll tell you that. So it wasn't something I could go into that way. But I started meeting people in bands in Madison, where I lived, Madison, Wisconsin at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I met these two guys that had a local music paper. And I realized that, a lot of the people that I met were, roadies, agents, lighting technicians, sound guys. So I realized that I didn't have to be a musician to be part of the music business, and
Yeah,
that's when
sure.
I realized, maybe I could write about it.
Uh-huh.
And so I did. I started writing things for the paper, and you know, um, my first thing really was going to bars and reviewing bands is
Yep.
how I started, and that was back in the summer of 1977.
77, that's a massive year for rock music. There's so much good stuff going on.
I know.
Wow. The rock scene, like Van Halen, of course, releasing then ACDC just a few years into things exploding. Great
Mhm.
stuff going on in the UK, in the punk scene, and all over
Oh,
the
yeah.
place. Fantastic. So where's the ACDC bug? When does that bite you? When do you hear them in the States? Because for us in Australia, there's all sorts of stories in the sort of mid 70s, but by a few years in, so the later stage of the 70s, of course, they're exploding in the States. So when did you first hear them?
Right. Well, in 77, their album Let There Be Rock was out,
Hmm.
but was getting no airplay in the States. So I had never heard of them. I didn't know what their music sounded like.
Uh-huh.
And so on Tuesday, August 16th, 1977, it was actually the day Elvis died.
Wow.
I was driving by the paper where they had a little office in Madison. And I always, my great intuition, I always call it the voice. This voice said, why don't you pull over and see if you can get another assignment? Because I was the only girl at the time.
Hmm.
It was all guys. And honestly, they didn't really want me to, to write for them. So I was doing whatever I could to get my foot in the door. And so I pulled over and I went in the office, and one of the editors had just hung up the phone. And I just asked, I was just stopping by to see if maybe you had something I could do or any new assignments coming up. And he kind of said, yeah, I just got off the phone with a promoter in Milwaukee called Stardate. They did a lot of the big shows. And he said they got a band coming down to the Stone Hearth, which is a local club downtown Madison. And he said the promoter needs like a gopher, somebody that'll run errands and, just kind of help out and make sure the band is comfortable. And, there's no pay, but you probably get a friend in for free. And I just jumped on it. I said, yeah, 4 o'clock. Absolutely. I'm going to go home, change clothes. I'll be down there. And as I'm taking off out the door, I turn around and I'm like, well, what band is it? Because at that time, during my high school years, I saw everybody. I saw Deep Purple, The Who, Cream, Black Sabbath. I mean, there was pretty much no one I had not seen
Hmm.
yet. And he says, I don't know, some band out of Australia called ACDC. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't think much of it. And I went home, changed, went down to the club at 4 o'clock. First thing they did is they sent me out to buy some Blue Nun wine for the singer.
Okay.
And the band was at dinner, so they weren't there. But their 3-man road crew was there.
Hmm.
So I ended up meeting them and talking to them and really hit it off with one of their roadies. His name is Barry Taylor. And, we had a fun chat and just hanging out. And so when the band got there, and I had done the deli platter thing, and we had buckets of ice with soda and, beer and things like that. And I had read they had 1-page promotional flyer. That was it. And the pictures were not very attractive, shall we say.
Uh-huh.
They looked a little sketchy to me, if you will. And their promo said that they had started because they'd just done the UK tour,
Okay.
and it said that they had started brawls from one end of England to the other. And I was like, oh my God, what did I agree to do here? So the band got there and I could hear them talking, and this dressing room was above the bar in like a little loft that you went upstairs, and so it was not very big or anything. And as the band was coming in the dressing room, I was walking out backwards saying, soda's over there, beer's there, you got some munchies. I said, if you need mixed drinks, just come downstairs to the bar. We can get you whatever you need. And I'm trying to leave. And as they're coming in, this guy with dark, shaggy hair, tats up and down his arms. He walks right up to me and sticks his face right in my face and yells, "Sit!" And I just, I grabbed a chair, I pulled it over, I sat down, and he went across the room. He poured 2 glasses of wine. He walked over, he handed me one and said, "Hi, I'm Bon Scott. You must be Sue."
Wow.
And I said, I looked at him and I said, "How do you know my name?" And then Malcolm, who I didn't realize was Malcolm yet at the time, he just had sat down, and he looked at Bon and they giggled, and he says, "Oh, the promoter told us about you. He said that you were going to do whatever we wanted." And that's kind of how it started. It was just, they were so much fun, but I still didn't know what they sounded like. So I hung out with them during the opening band set, and Angus never talked to anybody. He was so quiet, and the promo said that he was like this little stick of dynamite, and I kept looking at him thinking, yeah, that's, sure. Just had no clue because he was so quiet. And so they got ready to go on, and I went downstairs and I got next to the soundboard, and I was only about maybe 30, 40 feet in front of the band because it wasn't that big of a club. And they came out, the lights went down, and the rhythm section, which today I still believe that Malcolm, Phil, and Cliff are the greatest rhythm section to ever live.
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, in my opinion. And so they launched into Livewire.
Uh-huh.
And then the spotlight came on, and Bon was standing there in tight jeans with no shirt on, and Angus, came, hit the first chord, and they just launched into the song, and I didn't even know what to think. I mean, I was so shocked, and I mean, in a good way, but I backed all the way up into the wall behind me, and the hair on my arms stood straight up. And I knew at that moment that these guys were going to be huge.
Wow.
And I mean huge.
Uh-huh.
And at that time, they played, Livewire, TNT, Whole Lotta Rosie, Dirty Deeds, The Jack. They had all those songs already.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's how I met the band.
Wow, that is amazing. That is amazing. Yeah, I mean, by then these guys are road hardened. They've like all those hits. They've got their set together. They've been busting out the beer barns in Australia for a couple of years. Just toured UK.
Yeah.
Wow. So you saw they were ready to take on the States. What was the reaction of the crowd, and how many people were there? What was this like?
Well,
Did they
I still
know the
have
band?
The poster. It was only $3 to get in.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was about 75 people there because nobody knew who they were.
Yeah.
But the 75 people were like right up to the front of the stage, just mesmerized. And when the show was over and the band went back up into the dressing room, every single person in the bar wanted to meet them.
Uh-huh.
So they, the line went through, and everybody, they got autographs, and they met everybody in the club, and I waited till they were done so I could talk to the band myself.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, they kind of filed out, and it got a little quieter, and I went over to Bon and I said, "Oh my God, Bon," I said, "you blew my socks off." And he looked at me and he goes, "I did what?" And I said, "Oh, no, that's an American slang. I'm sorry. You were amazing. You guys are amazing, And then they all kind of started to listen to me like, what is this? And so I told them, and I don't know why I said it, but this is what I said. I said, it's going to take a couple years. I said 2, maybe 3 years, and you guys are going to be internationally huge. And someday you're going to be as big as the Rolling Stones. And they laughed so hard. They were just hysterical over that. And Angus was sitting on the couch in front of me. He pulled his shoe off and stuck his foot in my face and said, "Oh, does that mean I could buy me some new socks?" And I said, "Yeah, Angus, I think someday you'll be able to buy yourself some new socks." And that became like a running joke for the next 40 years. And I would like to say that AC/DC is the only band on the planet to ever co-headline a show with the Rolling Stones.
Okay, there you go.
So,
Good call. Good call. Yeah, I mean, and those guys have had a good friendship. I remember years ago the Stones touring Australia, and they'd get Angus and Malcolm up for some songs,
yeah.
and obviously enjoyed. Wow, Susan, that's a crazy introduction to AC/DC. Most of
I
us heard them on the radio first, before anything
yeah.
else.
I saw them live, which was way better,
Yeah, yeah.
than even hearing an album or hearing them on the radio. But when I saw them live, I was like, it was almost like hearing rock and roll for the first time.
Uh-huh.
Like I'd never heard it done that way before. It's kind of hard to describe, but it was very unique, Bon's voice and Angus. When I saw him running around, I didn't quite understand why at first, and I thought this is kind of strange because you don't see that. And then when he fell down and twirled around on his back, I thought he fell by accident the first time I saw it.
Yeah.
So so the little stick of dynamite came alive on stage.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. He did not disappoint.
So what happens from there? Did you review this show? Did you start writing about them as a band?
Well, what I did actually, I was there just to help out, and there was another person that reviewed the show that night.
Mm-hmm.
But I started I became like an ACDC beacon in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
I told everybody about this band. I was crazy about them. And then on the second leg of the US tour in December of 77, they came back to Wisconsin. And that was December 4th, 1977. They played in Milwaukee. I went and reviewed the show, and then we went upstairs to this living room. There's like an apartment upstairs from the bar. They played at the Electric Ballroom. And we sat down, myself and all 5 band members. I had my trusty little tape recorder.
Uh-huh.
And I was sitting next to Bon, and we were holding the tape recorder up between our legs. And I did it lasted about a half hour, but I call it complete mayhem. I really can't call it an interview. They were so unruly. They wouldn't answer anything seriously at all. And it got to be really funny because I was trying to be really, I was just a kid. I was trying to be like what I thought I should be. So I just kept pushing with the questions. And I said to Bon, so you just got back from the UK and, now you're back in the States again. I said, what's the difference between the British audiences and the American audiences? And Bon looked at me and he goes, one's British and one's American.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it. That was his answer. So it went downhill after that.
Okay, that was the good answer.
It was a lot of fun. They were so goofy. I mean, really goofy. They were one time. Angus asked me to marry him twice during the interview, and after the second time I said no, he said, "Fine, you're too short for me anyway."
That's saying something for how tall Angus is.
Yeah, and then one time Malcolm decided he was going to crawl across the table at me, growling, and they were just kids. I mean, they were just having fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we left, I had 2 friends with me, and we stayed at a different hotel than they did. And Malcolm, and Angus, they're like, come on back to the hotel and hang out. So okay, so we go downstairs and we're leaving the bar. And this cab pulls up with the band in it. And Angus and Bon threw Malcolm out, grabbed my girlfriend Terry, threw her in the cab, and said, "Malcolm will tell you where our hotel is." And they took off. So it was me and one girlfriend and Malcolm. So we get in my car, and Malcolm gets behind me in the back seat, and he spends the whole ride to the hotel either covering my eyes or trying to grab the steering wheel from me.
Okay.
So very, very funny. I love those guys. I mean, we just continued to stay in touch over the years, and I've been lucky to stay, friendly with them.
Mm-hmm.
I've interviewed them many times over the years, and I've written, I've got Rock and Roll Fantasy was my first book, and that's kind of really about all the bands that I met during that time period.
Yep.
But then I did the ACDC FAQ book, and then I have the ACDC Let There Be Rock book. So I've definitely written a lot about them.
That's awesome. Far out. Hey, talking about Malcolm, his onstage persona is quite reserved. He's up the back, and yet anyone who knows what's going on knows he is driving the band. And as you said, that rhythm section is unbelievably massive. Even in this podcast, I've had over 150 interviews, and so many guitar players will quote Angus and Malcolm, make sure they mention that Malcolm as a huge influence on what they're doing. So just, I guess, to back up. So Malcolm, he's the quiet guy on stage in converse to Angus, but from what I've read and heard, he was really one guy in the band who also believed, as you did, that they would become massive and that they could break through. So he seemed to be the quiet guy on stage, but very driven for the band off stage. Is that accurate? Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely. And I knew he was the boss the whole time.
Uh-huh.
So I love them, but I've always had a special place in my heart for Malcolm, because I love what he used to say. He said, "If you're not with us, you're against us."
Uh-huh.
And his favorite quote when I first met him and knew him in the early days, he always said, "All I want to be is filthy rich." And I guess, he ended up being pretty rich. He did. But during the interview, when we did that first interview, I asked him if they were doing what they set out to do. And Malcolm said, "We set out to be Led Zeppelin, and we ended up being the Monkees." So Malcolm was funny. He was very chatty.
Mm-hmm.
He actually talked more than Angus did.
Okay, yep.
So Malcolm and I, when we would get together, we would just, talk about everything. And but I knew that he was the one that made all the decisions. And he was, whether they had managers, they had record executives, they had all those people, Malcolm still called the shots.
I hope you are enjoying today's interview. Now, this podcast is brought to you by The Pedal Movie, a feature-length film all about effects pedals created by the music gear marketplace Reverb. Now, we love guitar pedals here on the Guitar Speak podcast, and we're super excited on the release of this film. The Pedal Movie explores how effects pedals and their builders have shaped modern music and guitar playing over time, from the fuzz pedal experiments of the Rolling Stones and Jimi Hendrix through the shoegaze and indie rock of the 90s and up to the modern day use of effects. Reverb also speaks with builders and leaders from more than 50 pedal brands to answer the big question, how did guitar pedals get so big? Reverb's The Pedal Movie is available now on iTunes, Google Play and Vudu. For more info, check out thepedalmovie.com. Today's show is also brought to you by Fretboard Biology. Today's episode is also brought to you by Fretboard Biology, the comprehensive online guitar course put together by master guitar teacher Joe Elliott. Now, I was a beta tester for the course, and as a music educator myself, I was very impressed by the logical layout and format of the course. Heavyweight guitarists such as Brett Garsed and Greg Koch have also endorsed the program, so check it out at www.fretboardbiology.com. Okay, back to our interview. This is interesting too, because obviously pre-internet, bands had to develop a following in a regional setting. They had to reinvent or restart drawing a following in regions rather than just using, rather than say an internet kind of thing these days where everyone can find out about everything that's going on. So they're really carving out a niche in your part of the world.
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember Barry saying to me that the first 2 legs over to the States, they put on 40,000 miles on the truck. That's how much work, when I first wrote Let There Be Rock, I actually broke their history down a week at a time.
Okay.
And it took me 7 years to find a break that was longer than 2 weeks.
Wow. Wow. That's
So they
unbelievable.
worked for it.
Yeah. Yeah. So underneath all the goofiness, there's a pretty hardcore work ethic for sure.
Yeah. Well, and that's, people with the one of the most fun things about seeing them I got to see them in 77, 78, and 79. And one of my favorite parts was watching the audience see the band
Mm-hmm.
that had never seen them before. And the looks on the faces of the audience was completely priceless.
That's awesome. Especially if they're opening for some band that everyone's there for, and then who are these guys? That's cool. That's awesome. Obviously, we get to 1980 and Bond passes away. That's a hugely tragic thing for obviously those around him, and for you as a friend as well. What's the impact there?
Yeah, that was really hard it's hard to put it into words because it was so shocking, so unexpected. I had seen them in Chicago, right outside Chicago in October of 79. And I didn't even go backstage and talk to the whole band. I was with Barry, and I told him to give the band my regards because I knew they were beyond exhausted. They were just burnt. And I knew they were going home for the holidays. I think they still had a few dates yet. Then they were going to London to start the new album. So I was like, hey, I don't want to. I know they're really tired, so just give them my love, and I'll see you when you come back over. And so everything seemed like going as planned, and they got to London. And I was actually going through. My mother was dying of cancer, and she was in the hospital, and the doctors had let her. They had given her a few days she could come home, which was actually the last time that she got to come home from the hospital. And I was driving up to pick her up, and they were playing. I kind of blocked it out, but it's probably most likely they were playing Highway to Hell.
Mm-hmm.
And the song ended, and the radio DJ said, and that's in tribute to the late Bon Scott, who was found dead today in a car in London. And I mean, that was, it was like somebody hitting you in the face with a hammer. I mean, I had to pull off the side of the road. I was, burst into tears. I found a payphone and called my boyfriend, and I said, turn on the TV, turn on the radio, see if you can get any kind of confirmation of this. Because then, there was no internet or anything, 24-hour news, no MTV,
Yeah.
none of that. So it was horrible. I mean, it was, it's still, I miss him to this day. I mean, Bon he was everything that you've heard he was and more.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really devastating. And I know the band took it really hard.
Yeah. Did you expect the band to wrap things up, or did you expect them to keep moving?
For a while, I think I was in shock, and I just kind of thought they were going to, take a break and kind of regroup. I didn't think that they would completely stop because Highway to Hell had just, I mean, it was skyrocketing. They were getting the airplay that they had worked so hard for.
Mm-hmm.
And they were thrilled with the album, with Mutt Lange, with the new production of the album and how it was being received. And everybody was so excited that I guess I thought they would take time off, but I didn't really think that they would completely give it up because, they went to, Bon's funeral, and Bon's father, had a talk with Malcolm and Angus and told Malcolm, he said, you can't quit. He said, you cannot. He said, you're there. You've made it that far, and Bon would never want you to quit. And I know, I think Bon would have been, if you will, on the other side, I think he would have been extremely upset if ACDC would have called it a day. And I now that I've known Brian since 1980, I swear he was born to take Bon Scott's place.
Uh-huh.
I really do. I mean, Brian is very similar to Bon in a lot of ways.
Yeah. How so?
So, he like Bon, Bon would party with anybody, okay? Bon would do a gig and then he'd hang out with the roadies or, whatever, and never wanted to, he didn't care, he just like, if you want to party, let's party. And Brian is the same way. Like, he will sit and talk to anybody. He constantly makes people laugh. He could be a stand-up comedian. I mean, he is so funny and he's so humble. I mean, there's never, and well, the whole band's like this, but there has never been an air around Brian Johnson of like, do you know who I am?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what band I play in? Never in a million years would he be like that. And I remember one night on the Ball Breaker tour backstage in Milwaukee, there was this couple talking to Brian and they were going, on and on about how great he was and what a great show it was and what an incredible voice he has. And he laughed and he goes, "What voice?" So yeah, Brian and Malcolm said that too when he auditioned for the band. Malcolm said that Brian was the first person that made him laugh after Bon died.
Wow.
So
there you go.
It was meant to be.
A good fit, yeah, and obviously stood the test of time. Yeah. So, sorry to jump around a little bit then. So then we come in recent years when Brian's had issues and he couldn't tour. And again, there's calls for Angus. I guess by now, Malcolm has passed away. His nephew's playing in the band. There was some criticism directed towards Angus. You guys should finish up the band. Why is Axel Rose subbing in this band? Why don't you just wrap it up with dignity? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I saw them play Wrigley Field in Chicago in September of 2015, and they killed it. They were amazing that night, but they were shooting a DVD, and that never was released. And I have a feeling that was, I thought he sounded great.
Mm-hmm.
But when you can hear, through the monitors and everything, Brian was having trouble hearing himself.
Yeah, okay. So he's already having the hearing issues.
Right. He was already having issues, and then they flew up to Canada after that show, and they played in the rain a couple nights. And Brian talks about how he was already congested. I think he had gotten a cold. And that you're not supposed to fly when you have a lot of congestion, and that's kind of what pushed it over the edge.
Okay. Yep.
So by the time they got to the next year on the Rocker Bus tour, and they were, they were in Atlanta when Brian ended up being told that he couldn't perform, that he had to take time off. And I know that there was a mutual guitar tech that worked for ACDC and Guns N' Roses.
Mm-hmm.
And they were also in Atlanta when this happened. So when Brian left to take care of his hearing, one thing ACDC never does is cancel shows.
Uh-huh.
If they cancel, they make them up. They do not cancel shows, and that's something that Malcolm just not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that Axel, and when I heard that Axel was, the guy that was going to fill in, I was like, what? No. I mean, in my book, I called him a red-headed riot starter.
Right.
Okay. So, so I was very skeptical. And I went to Atlanta I think it was September 1st, 2016, Rocker Bus tour, Axel's on vocals. And I'm going there with a pretty skeptical look on it. Like, oh, okay, Axel, really? Let's see it. And I did get a kick out of the very beginning of the show. You have to be really good at staying out of Angus's way.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. That is an art in itself.
Yeah.
And right when they started the show, Axel he was moving backwards
Hmm.
toward the drum riser just as Angus was coming up behind him. And I thought, oh no. I mean, this is the first song. And he must have caught it out of the corner of his eye, because right away he stopped on his heel and turned a 180 and went the other way and missed Angus. And I laughed and I thought to myself, it's not as easy as you thought it was going to be, is it? But I have to say, Axel did an incredible job. He really did. He acted like a kid in a candy store. He seemed very humbled
Hmm.
by the position he was in, and he hit every note. I mean, he knocked it out of the park, and nothing. I'm not taking anything away from Brian, but Axel did the job that needed to be done for just a few dates.
Yep, yep.
And that's what Malcolm would have wanted.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. I had friends on the Australian support of that tour, and they said just Axel nailed it, and especially some of the Bond era material, just approaching it slightly differently to how Brian had made that stuff his own, which brilliantly had done. Yeah, there was some good raves. I think the calls that maybe they should wrap up the band, and maybe Angus should close it down. As soon as that tour got underway, a lot of those concerns actually stopped when people actually saw what was going on. And in really lovely news, obviously, Brian's back in the studio and creating new music with the band, which is a nice ending to the story. It would have been fairly tragic if Brian had have just wrapped it up purely on the medical situation at the time.
Yes, absolutely. And after Malcolm passed, and I saw the pictures of them at his funeral.
Yeah, yeah.
And this was still, people were still talking about, is Angus going to go back in the studio with Axel, and is Guns N' Roses going to play for him, or all this talk. And when I saw the looks on their faces at Malcolm's funeral, I knew right then and there, I was like, they're going to do the new album with Angus. They're the ones. Angus needed the people that knew Malcolm almost as well as he did around him, and they didn't fail. Phil, Cliff, Brian, Stevie, they all stepped up.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was so happy to hear that, and Power Up. I mean, oh my goodness, how great of an album that is.
Absolutely.
And you can hear Malcolm's riffs everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, he's like all over the album.
That's
so
cool.
it's a wonderful tribute to him.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that Stevie is taking Malcolm's spot. Obviously the nephew of Malcolm and Angus, so it's kept it in the family. He's playing Malcolm's Gretsch model guitars, like he's nailing that tone. He's nailing that signature Malcolm tone, which is such a big deal as we spoke about earlier. Yeah. So tell me about the book. So you spent years. I mean, obviously from almost day dot, you've been in connection with the band. When did you decide to write the book? Obviously, there's those years of research, and what inspired the update that you've recently published?
Well, actually, I had written 2 books before the Let There Be Rock book. And I literally, believe it or not, I never thought of writing a biography of ACDC, because I figured, everybody in the world's going to do that.
Yeah, sure.
And I went to a book expo in 2004 in Chicago. It's like the Olympics of book, authors and things in the States. And I met the people from Music Sales Group, Omnibus Press, and they were looking for someone, because at the time, there hadn't been an ACDC biography since 1992.
Okay.
And this is 2004. So they were looking for someone to write a biography for them. And because of my first book, Rock and Roll Fantasy, which I was there to do a signing for, they knew who I was. And I met them just accidentally by walking around the expo. And I found out that, they were actually looking for somebody to write a biography for them. And it took 9 weeks to get the deal, but it came out in 2006. It went into 11 languages. It did very well. And then, especially, with all the changes that the band has gone through in the last 10 years, and
Mhm.
especially, Malcolm's passing, I I petitioned my publishers and said, I really think we should update this book and bring it up to date. And what's funny is, when I finished it, I updated it at the end of 2019.
Okay.
And I knew there was a new album, but
Yep.
I didn't know the songs and I didn't know the title.
Yep.
So I couldn't put that in the book. But I did say that once that album came out, it would break records all over the world, which it did.
Yeah. Wow.
So I was happy about that.
Another good call from the first day you met them. You're making predictions, finishing your latest update. You're still doing that. So I think you've got a good track record. So I'll just go with whatever you say from here on about ACDC.
Well, what's funny is, the Rolling Stones joke. I didn't know that they idolized the Rolling Stones,
Uh-huh.
because I didn't know them. I didn't know anything about them. And so over the years, I would always ask them after every time I saw them. I'd say, "Now, can I say you're as big as the Rolling Stones?" And on the Black Ice tour, ran that by Malcolm, and Malcolm looked at Angus, and they started to giggle. And Malcolm said, "I don't know about that, but I know we blew him off the stage at the SARS benefit." And they were laughing really hard at that. And so when I saw Angus after the Wrigley Field gig, we met up at his hotel the next day,
Yeah.
because I had FAQ books for the whole band.
Okay.
And he was so cool. I had my girlfriends with me, and he was exhausted, and he still hung out, and we visited for a good half hour or so. We got pictures taken. And so right when I said goodbye, again, I said, "Now, can I say you're as big as the Rolling Stones?" And not a second passed, and Angus says, "Nope. Mick and Keith said they'll always be taller than us." So
Very true.
yeah, they won't take a compliment. They never will from me.
Uh-huh.
They
Uh-huh.
just won't.
I think that says something. Well, where to from here? What do you think's going to happen in the next chapter of ACDC?
I'm hoping that we see a tour.
Mm-hmm.
I know that they have the stage done. It was
Okay.
done 2 years ago before the pandemic hit for Power Up. So they have the stage ready to go. It's all waiting. And I'm really, praying that we see something booked before the end of the year, because it looks like, down where you are, they've got live concerts now, and we're
Yeah, starting
starting
to come back.
slowly to
Yeah.
get to that.
Okay. Yep. And do you see Brian touring again?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Well, he just came on stage with the Foo Fighters
Yeah.
in the last week, and he can still sing it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's it's certainly not a matter of skill or desire to get up there. It's I guess the health is the
Yeah.
principal concern. So yeah, but that was awesome to see. So you'd hope he'd be up for a full ACDC show, definitely.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I hope so. I really do. I mean, that would be the ultimate, to see them back out one more time.
Yeah, great. So Susan, the book is Let There Be Rock, the story of ACDC. Where can people find this?
All my books are on Amazon,
Yep.
and also Amazon in Australia and all over the world. And if you want to get a hold of me, just go to susanmasino.com, and you can email me through there. I sell signed copies also, and I can be found on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Fantastic. Well, I'll add all of those links in our show notes as well, so people can chase that up. Well, Susan, congratulations on not only the book, but the opportunity to update it. And like I said, we'll include all those links, and encourage all the listeners to check it out. The book is Let There Be Rock, the story of ACDC. The author is Susan Masino. Susan, thank you so much for joining me today, and all the best.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me.
All right, there you go. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Now, this podcast was brought to you by The Pedal Movie, the feature-length film all about effects pedals, created by Reverb. Reverb's The Pedal Movie is available now on iTunes, Google Play and Vudu. For more information, visit thepedalmovie.com. The show was also brought to you by Fretboard Biology, the comprehensive online guitar course put together by ex-head of guitar at GIT, Joe Elliott. Check out fretboardbiology.com for more information. Alrighty then, you have been listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. My name is Matt Wakeling, and as the legendary German rocker Michael Schenker once told me,
keep rocking, keep on rocking.
Keep on rocking indeed. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you next time. Bye now.